As with any community, the baseball community here on YouTube has its share of characters. Characters I'm thankful for. People who add to the general consciousness of the sport by bringing unique perspectives to the table. You know what? I like the table metaphor. Let's act like we're back in high school for a minute. There's me arriving to the baseball scene as kind of a loner at first, and rightfully so, a country boy in what feels like a suburban space. I've got some mud on my boots from showing hogs at an FFA event, and hell, I might actually have rabies. Based on our mutual love of the Orioles, I'm joined by the popular kid, Cam23, and we talk about how strange it is that there isn't already a video on Brooks and Frank Robinson. So we fixed that. Shortly after that, the guys from the AV Club decide to join us. This is of course the boys from the 3BGB podcast, also the voices of the Seguin River Monsters, Dutch Chattahoochee and T-Texas Tony Turnstile, the latter of which has a baseball reference page. They introduce us to their friends Bonnie and Mo Jorgen of ATG, game designers by day, punk roadies by night, baseball diehards 24/7. Last but not least, we're joined by the kid whose A+ always messes up the curve on our history tests, Retro Baseball. We get into a conversation about the strange and forgotten players of Major League Baseball, and how no two people would pick the same one, evidence of the vast array of characters this game has given us over the years. So here's what we're going to do, take turns telling you about a player who may have been lost in the shuffle, so of course please like and subscribe. I'll provide links to each contributor here. Do the honors and lead us off, Retro Baseball.
September 4th, 1919, a boy named Eddie Waitkus was born to two Lithuanian immigrants in Cambridge, Massachusetts. From a very early age, it was clear that Waitkus had a special talent for baseball. Throughout his early career, he was called the Natural by his teammates, a nickname that would eventually inspire the book and later movie loosely based off his life. Waitkus would begin his career in 1938, playing for a semi-professional team in Lisbon Falls, Maine. But just before his career could take off, he was drafted to fight in the Second World War. Waitkus saw some of the bloodiest fighting of the war with the United States Army in the Philippines and was awarded 4 Bronze Stars. During Operation Cartwheel, Waitkus saved the life of a badly bleeding fellow soldier, leaving his foxhole during an attack on his position and finding some safety pins to stop the bleeding. Upon making his return to baseball in 1946, he quickly became a star for the Chicago Cubs. He also became a popular figure in the media as he was well educated and fluent in 5 different languages. Following the 1948 season, the Cubs traded Waitkus to the Philadelphia Phillies for a package including Monk Dubell and Dutch Leonard. All appeared to be going well for our friend Eddie, but that was soon going to change. During his time with the Cubs, a fan named Ruth Ann Steinhagen began to form a very strange infatuation with Waitkus. From the outside, Steinhagen appeared to be a normal girl. She was the daughter of parents who had immigrated from Berlin, Germany in their early 20s and had recently taken a job as a typist. But over the years, going to see Waitkus play every chance she had, her obsession began to become extreme. At home, she created a shrine to Waitkus with hundreds of photographs and newspaper clippings, often spreading them out and looking at them for hours. According to her mother, she would even set an empty plate across from her at dinner for Eddie. Since the ballplayer was from the Boston area, she developed an unusual craving for baked beans, and because Waitkus was of Lithuanian descent, she began to study Lithuanian. In 1948, Steinhagen's concerned family sent her to a psychiatrist, but her obsession only worsened. Even Waitkus being traded to the Philadelphia Phillies could not stop her obsession. On June 14, 1949, the Phillies came to Chicago to face the Cubs. Waitkus played in the game, recording a hit and scoring 2 runs. After the game which she attended, Steinhagen traveled to the hotel in which Waitkus was residing and checked into a room on the 12th floor. She gave Waitkus a handwritten note through the bellboy, inviting him to visit her in her room. Claiming to be a woman named Ruth Ann Burns, Waitkus opened her note. It read the following: Mr. Waitkus, it is extremely important that I see you as soon as possible. We are not acquainted, but I have something of importance to speak to you about. I think it would be to your advantage to let me explain it to you. After insisting that she was leaving the hotel the next day and pressing the timeliness of the request, she concluded, I realize that this is a little out of the ordinary, but as I said, it's rather important. Please come soon. I won't take much of your time. I promise. According to Waitkus' friend and roommate Russ Meyer, the note arrived to the door of their 9th floor room after 11 p.m. The two had been out all night having dinner with Meyer's family and fiancé, and were already very tired. Waitkus called the room to see what was going on, but the woman would not discuss the details over the phone. According to Meyer, Waitkus believed the note was possibly from a friend. At the time, Waitkus knew some people named Burns and suspected that this could all be just one elaborate joke. But for whatever reason it may have been, Waitkus went to meet her in the room. As he opened the door and entered the room, Steinhagen introduced herself as Mary Brown, a friend of Ruth Ann, and walked away, assuring him that Ruth Ann would be returning to the room very soon. But within a blink of an eye, she had turned back around, this time holding a .22 caliber rifle she had retrieved from the closet. She began to yell at the top of her lungs, "If I can't have you, nobody else can," before opening fire on Waitkus and shooting him in the chest. Steinhagen had originally planned to stab him and use the gun to shoot herself, but changed her plans last minute. She still intended to shoot herself, but was unable to find another bullet. While Waitkus was lying on the floor, screeching and bleeding from the chest, Steinhagen called down to the front desk of the hotel and told them about the situation. I'd like to imagine that this was a very interesting phone call.
Yes, this is Suzanne from the lobby speaking. So there's this guy in my room. He's not doing very good. He has, a bullet hole in his chest. Hold on, please say that again, ma'am. He has a bullet in his chest. Oh my, how did this happen? I shot him. Gertrude, we have a code purple.
It was later reported that she held Waitkus' head on her lap until medical assistance arrived. Waitkus would miraculously survive after dying multiple times on the operating table, and would return to baseball the following year in 1950. Steinhagen was found not guilty by reason of insanity and was kept in a mental asylum until 1952.
When Hap Billy approached me to share my most forgotten player, I instantly knew who I was going to pick. As an Orioles fan, this guy might be obscure even if you're a fan of the team. Jimmy Paredes is the guy I'm going to be talking about. He started his career with the Houston Astros, and after a few seasons there, he played in 9 games for the Kansas City Royals before being selected off waivers by the Baltimore Orioles. Manny Machado was out with an injury, and the O's needed someone who could fill in at third base. Paredes became that guy, making an instant impact as a switch-hitting utility player who contributed in a limited capacity but posted some great numbers. Albeit it's just in 18 games, but he hit .302 with an .818 OPS and a 26% better than league average OPS+. This came in the midst of the Orioles making it to the postseason by securing the American League East Division crown. And while Paredes got just 1 plate appearance in the entirety of the playoffs, I still remember him, mostly because he came back the following year and got into 104 games. And considering his role was really solid. Jimmy was a guy who I got an autograph from back in the day, and he was one of those players who was scrappy and just a really good dude. He played the game the right way, and while his numbers weren't going to jump off the page, he's a memorable player to me. After 2015, at just 26 years old, Paredes would get just 1 more season in the big leagues before disappearing from the game. What's all the more surprising is that he's still just 34 years old, and that postseason run for the Orioles happened nearly a decade ago. You have to look past the low on base numbers, but Jimmy Paredes was a valuable asset to an Orioles team that needed some depth. For the sake of my happiness, I'm going to pretend that the American League Championship Series didn't happen, but at the end of the day, those were some great days to be an Orioles fan. Thank you to Hap Billy for inviting me to participate in this video today. Make sure to subscribe to his channel, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Later.
Howdy! We are ATG. I'm Bonnie.
I am Jordan.
Virtual mode engaged.
MILB Hat Billy asked us to make a vid.
Talk about somebody.
Talk about somebody
about dearly.
Obscure or unknown to the masses. And that's what we do.
Cool. That is our thing. That is what we love.
Burnis Wright, also known as
Wild Bill. He
Wild.
started his career off as a pitcher. He was a pitcher who had poor control, So he was not a cowboy like most other Wild Bills that you probably
Not a
know
cowboy.
the name for, but the nickname Wild Bill came from the poor control he had as a pitcher.
6'4", 220. Hoss of a man.
Outfielder Bill,
Outfielder
which
Bill.
is exactly what he was.
Like a Dave Winfield kind of build.
I like that, yeah. The mid-1940s, he left the States leagues and everything up here because the fame was better in Mexico and the money was better in Mexico. So
and the racism was less in Mexico.
Yeah. Stats for Wild Bill. We had some help on these from Adam Dorowski of Sports Reference. He has gone through and tallied a ton of stuff. Check him out on @BaseballTwit on the Twitter sphere. And Eric Shalek, who created the MLE formula to kind of help bring some of these lost legends to the modern era. 1,871 hits through about 6,000 at-bats, 307 doubles, 109 triples, 123 homers, 855 RBI, 196 steals, and a 333 batting average.
Woo!
Jumping over to what Shalek has projected, 1,314 runs, 2,934 hits, 480 doubles, 195 triples, 169 homers, 1,344 RBI, 209 steals, and a slash line of 299, 353, 440. And roughly, this is a weird thing for some of these guys, but roughly a 55 WAR, if you're into that number.
Straight gangster. You got any comps for him off the top of my head? I got Paul Wayne or Roberto Clemente type.
That's probably the closest you're going to get. Size-wise and positionally, you have Dave Winfield.
Tall drink of water!
Winfield might have a little bit more power.
You hush,
but
woman.
The speed and the defense and all of that, he's a weird mix of all of these guys.
Jake's mom told me to shh. Wild Bill Wright. As Mo so eloquently told you, Wild Bill had the stats, but also he could handle business in other manners.
Yes.
In 1950, in the Mexican League, Mexico versus Jalisco, teammate Rufus Lewis, pitcher, played for Newark Eagles.
Really good player.
Frickin' legend. Throws a curveball behind league-leading hitter Adolfo Cabrera of Jalisco. Cabrera loses his shit completely, charges the mound, bashes Rufus with a frickin' bat. There's photos of this. There's photos. Wild Bill comes to the rescue, knocks Cabrera with a bat as Cabrera was getting ready to smash in the skull of a fallen Rufus Lewis. What's that make Wild Bill? Straight up homie. Homies help homies always. Finished up his career down there up to 1956, never went back to the States.
Opened a restaurant.
Lived out the rest of his life.
Paradise.
In paradise, making delicious hamburgers. We are ATG, Bonnie,
Mo.
MLB Hat Billy. Thanks, homie.
We are here for you.
See ya.
ATG Baseball, the present and future of classic roster creation. We are here for you.
All right, well, let's get to it. Let's get to Dutch Chattahoochee's. You do some talking while I pull up this man right here. We'll get the graphic up for get a little bit of tunes in the background. Right here. Let's go. And my LB Hat Billy's coming up, cooking up baseball fun. Forgotten player.
All right, so this
What
guy.
do you say, buddy?
This guy's forgotten for the wrong reasons. Okay, but when I was thinking about this, I was sitting at the home. I was like, I want to think of somebody who never lived up to the hype, because that's a lot more interesting than somebody who played in the pros for a while. But the year was 2003. This guy was drafted in the first round, pro pick, Lastings Milledge.
Lastings Milledge. Heck of a pick.
And the reason I chose this guy is because I remember in high school, I think it was like 10th grade, he was supposed to be like the next whoever. He was supposed to be great, but unfortunately it did not happen that way. But, he had all the
Milledge
potential in the
was
world.
a hot prospect,
Yeah.
played with a lot of teams, but what was even crazier about Lastings Milledge was he ended up going to Japan and played for the Yakult Swallows.
There you go.
And if you go here to, if I can find it, go to the baseball reference for Last Things Milledge right here. We'll finish that thought next thing, but that's who it is. We'll close that out. Play with that, and we'll talk a little bit of Last Things Milledge. So we'll go to the bottom of 5, and we'll talk a little bit of Jack Howell. Check out Jack Howell. Check out this footage right here. Let's get up the Jack Howell. This is great. Jack, and I have to do the play this. Okay. And then we go to OBS, and I have to turn. Oh, this sound's been on the entire time. Maybe we've had an echo the entire time for all I know.
I don't know.
All right. Here's the Jack Howell broken bat home run, if you can believe it. Look at this. And we can't hear it, but people watching should be able to get that audio.
Look at that. It's a classic little strutter on the bases.
The replay on the broken bat home run. Jack Howell. There it is. He barreled it, though. I think it must have been like a sliver crack in the handle, and he barreled it anyway. Let's look at that replay there. Vin Scully's calling that. I think Garagiola is the other guy on the call. Takes MLB a little while to get back. There's Johnny Ray, by the way.
Johnny Ray.
Johnny Ray, here it is. He just goes fastball, crushes it to right, and the bat head just goes flying.
Wouldn't that suck if that would have went foul?
So there it is.
It's down. I wonder if the player kept the bat, if he's allowed to keep the bat.
I don't know. But my vote is Jack Howell, and I do love a utility guy. The leadoff man aboard.
Speaking of broken bats.
Speaking of broken bats, and there's the play over to first, and they do get him. Somehow the Jack Howell video played into that splinter action. That's kind of random.
Now, if only the ball would have went out like it did.
Yeah, it is the home run right there.
John B. Wockenfuss is my favorite strange player. He had a strange name, of course. He's also known for having the single strangest closed batting stance of his era. Looks strange from this angle, but check out this angle, complete with the wiggling fingers as if it didn't look funny enough. There's adjusting to being weak against off-speed pitches. Then there's this. Surprisingly, he'd hit for power quite often. Old Johnny Wockenfuss would of course have a one-of-a-kind origin story that highlights the plight of the American working class in a pivotal time for our country's economy and labor practices. John was born in Welch, West Virginia, and if you're not familiar with Welch, which is the county seat of McDowell County, West Virginia, you will be soon as the next national election cycle starts to ramp up, and politicians from both major parties will descend upon the quiet town of Welch, making promises which to this point have all been empty, to bring new and exciting industries to an area reeling from the coal industry's gradual decline, assuring voters that if they show their allegiance at the ballot box, McDowell County will join the rest of the country which modernizes around them, and it will free many families from a cycle that includes drug addiction, food insecurity, and incarceration. At the very least, maybe fewer exploitative television hosts and YouTubers will drive there from the coast to interpret mountain dialects and a traditional way of life to other coastal elites, we can only hope. But Welch hasn't always been that way. It was actually a model of prosperity in the 40s and 50s. It was the wealthiest town in West Virginia, and it wasn't particularly close. It was a destination for a good-paying job, and a good backdrop for William Wockenfuss, a shipyard worker from Baltimore, Maryland, to meet Mildred Stewart, the daughter of a lumberjack from Oceana, West Virginia, and start a family, with John being born in 1949. They'd moved back to the mid-Atlantic, Wilmington, Delaware to be exact, a few years later. The pipeline of lower to lower middle class laborers to and from southern West Virginia and Baltimore was well documented. It goes deeper than the long-standing Bluefield Orioles of the Appalachian League, with proof being my own family tree. My grandmother, Joanne Whalen, a coal miner's daughter from McDowell County who moved to Aberdeen, Maryland when my great-grandfather contracted black lung in the mines and went to work on an assembly line in the budding aircraft industry. It was there she'd meet my grandfather, John, as he returned from fighting in the Korean War, and they'd settle back in the heart of the Appalachians. When the Washington Senators chose catcher John B. Wockenfuss in the 42nd round of the 1967 draft, scout Joe Branzell commented that he walked into an old house that was dilapidated, in the worst shape of any he'd ever set foot in, and the first words out of John's mouth were, "Where do I sign?" The signing bonus was $500, but Branzell was confident that John would have paid him $500 to play. This is behavior born of a mindset of breaking the family cycle, which is still very prominent in Appalachia and other underprivileged areas today. The best and brightest never stay, they just embark on a life constantly chasing opportunity elsewhere. John's road through the minors made pit stops in Geneva, New York, Burlington, North Carolina, Shelby, North Carolina, and Pittsfield, Massachusetts before he was traded to the St. Louis Cardinals organization, and again in short order to the Detroit Tigers organization. John's stats at the plate were above average for a catcher's, but his nickname, Wildman Wockenfuss, preceded him. He had a temper and a tendency to tear up dugouts with a baseball bat when frustrated. He was known for breaking his hand in his high school quarterback days, trying to punch his teammate, a receiver who dropped a crucial pass. He had a take-no-prisoners style and suffered many concussions as a result of being a catcher in general and crowding the plate with a Pete Rose-esque stance that he'd eventually scrap for his signature closed-off stance. He finally broke into the big leagues in August of 1974 after 8 years in the minors. The Tigers utilized him as a true Swiss Army knife of a utility player, doing time behind the plate, at first base, all three outfield positions, and as a DH. He was a member of the Riders of the Lonesome Pine, a name the Detroit Reserves gave themselves based on the novel Trail of the Lonesome Pine. We all know Wockenfuss named it, I mean, come on. On July 12, 1979, at Comiskey Park, the well-documented disco demolition night that ended in a riot and forfeit by the White Sox before the second game of a doubleheader, Wildman Wockenfuss, who was geared up to catch Game 2, stood guard of the entrance of the Tigers clubhouse as intoxicated rioters destroyed the field. His only career walk-off home run occurred in one of the final games of the 1982 season against his childhood team, the Orioles, crippling their playoff hopes. It was good old-fashioned bad luck that Wockenfuss would be dealt to the Phillies during spring training of 1984, a season that would see the Tigers dominate all year and win the World Series. John was frustrated at the move because he was under the impression he'd finally see his shot at a starting role, but once again, he was a utility guy. He'd be out of baseball by 1986. In 2014, Wockenfuss was outspoken about the MLB rule change designed to reduce home plate collisions. He would officially be diagnosed with dementia a couple years later, citing that his hands shook so bad that he could no longer sign autographs. He wanted to see a safer future for baseball's young stars. Dementia eventually led to his death in 2022.